with screens and distractions, we invite you to reconnect with the natural world around you. Welcome to Nature Bound, a podcast dedicated to unpacking the intrinsic bond between humans and nature. We'll uncover the benefits of spending time outdoors, including how a nature-centric lifestyle can improve your mental health, elevate your leadership skills, and unleash your creativity. And now here's your host, outdoor enthusiast, and renowned author of The 7 Principles of the Magic Rock, Emmanuel Rose.
Welcome to this edition of Nature Bound, which is a special episode which will be recounting the fall migration that I made this year, which has become an annual trip for me. And we'll talk about fishing in Southern Oregon. We'll talk about bird hunting in Saskatchewan and upland bird hunting in Eastern Oregon, and all the things that go into a 4,400 mile road trip and over 5 weeks on the road. And joining me today to help facilitate this conversation is a good friend and a very talented photographer named Kelley Hamby. And I appreciate you joining me today, Kelley.
No, great to be here, Emmanuel. I'm excited to get into it. One thing I've been thinking about is surprisingly, we've known each other for almost 20 years now, and spent a pretty good deal of time afield with one another. And then a few years ago, I know that you started really carving out a certain number of time, making a commitment to spending a certain minimum number of days outdoors every month, which I thought was fantastic. And now that has seemed to morph into a really enviable portion of time that you spend each fall outside. And I would love to talk to you about how you manage that.
Yeah. Well, I think it has been a process, and throughout my life, I mean, I've been going outside since I could be tied to a tree, basically. But as an adult, I always looked at time outside as an escape. Like I got to get away from my job, or got to get away from culture, or it's like kind of an escapist mentality. Where in the last 5 years, I've brought it more into an idea of it's more of the fabric of my life, and so on a daily basis, I'm outside to hear the trees and the wind and all that. But I'm committed to spending a day a week outside and a week a month outside in some form or fashion, and constructed my career and my relationships in order to support that priority. And so that's kind of the high level, and there's a lot of details in there. So
right. Well, that's what we're gonna try to fetter out today, because I think that's from my position, I do get to spend a lot of time outdoors, and I do make it a priority, but not to the level to which you've done, and it seems a little bit like a magic trick. So I've kind of gonna peel this thing back and see the mechanisms in a couple of different ways. Like, first of all, I'm interested just in the trip because you have some interest outside of my own. You're a very avid bird hunter. I dabble in it when you're around. But I'm curious, again, for people who don't know, like, would you give the overview of what the start of the migration looks like for you? Like, what's on the menu for you each year?
Yeah. Well, the start of the year for me is Labor Day, and that's when the steelhead are starting to show back up in good numbers. And so Southern Oregon on the Rogue River is the first trip of the year, and that is in a pretty remote spot, and without any real connection to work or culture, and really just getting up early before the sun's up, getting out onto a steelhead run, and fishing every morning, and then it gets too hot by the middle of the day. So we get a lot of time in camp with time to do some creative work or meditate or observe. And that's what I did this year. Was really lucky that there was a number of ospreys that were in our immediate camp area, and I got to watch for 7 days in a row their process of sitting, observing the river, waiting for a fish to show up, them hunting, and some successful about 60% of the time, which I was surprised. For a guy that's a professional hunter, you'd think the osprey would be better than that.
I would suggest, from a guy who likes to fish, I would love those numbers myself. So that must be interesting going from, and maybe this is not true, but maybe it is. So I've been to where you're talking about on the Rogue, and that's a boat in, boat out only sort of section.
Yeah.
I know you and some mutual friends go out there every year and camp it up. So is that a transition? I mean, do you feel bathed in it from the first day, or are you tapering up to that, or is that like a really good kickoff for that whole season for you?
Yeah, it is. It used to be jarring, right? Where I'd go from whatever my 60-hour a week work, and then just go to zero, basically.
Right.
But I've kind of the connection points now are spending time every day in a more mindful way, and so it's like I get to accentuate the mindfulness starting on day one. I have less distractions, and so I can spend more time breathing, observing, sitting on the bank if I want to just sit and watch. And so no, it's there's kind of a thread now of calmness that runs through all the things that I'm engaged in. So it's more like a treat. It's more like dessert to be able to spend that week out there.
I really am envious of that, because I oftentimes find my own self thrashing right up till the minute you have to leave, and then the enjoyment doesn't kick in until all that stuff's calmed down. So I've got a little to learn from you there. So let's say you have a fantastic week on the Rogue, y'all break camp. What's next for you after that?
So then went back and spent some time in Northern California to re-provision and reset the gear and repack. Yeah. And then from there, driving north to starting a trip to Saskatchewan. So it took about 4 or 5 days to get to Saskatchewan. I had some work to do in Missoula, and so I camped my way to Missoula, stayed in a motel for a night, took care of my work, and then shot up to central Saskatchewan to start camping again.
And so is that one of the things that I always am curious about when I see stuff that I'm envious of, is like, how do those guys or gals do that? Like, what's the mechanism behind it? So is it difficult to get your firearms and stuff across the border? How are you finding places to hunt? Are you hunting public ground? There's a lot of questions here about the Saskatchewan hunt for me.
Yeah, international hunting takes some planning. There, obviously, you've got to get the guns in and out. So shotguns got to be checked on the American side first. Mm-hmm. Then they get checked in on the Canadian side. Pay a tax to import them, your own guns.
Sure, of course.
And then there's also, challenges there's certain limitations to how much ammunition you can bring into Canada. So you got to be aware of that. Just like you can only import so much beer or wine or anything like that. And the licensing, I take care of the licensing online and get everything delivered usually about 60 days in advance, just to make sure that there's no crisis right at the border.
That's a good thing there. And so do you find like they're generally at the border decent about the firearms, or is it kind of a coin toss on who you get?
Yeah, my experience with importing the shotguns has been I've never had an issue. I think it's $25 Canadian, and those guys are usually pretty pretty easygoing. I think it's a different kind of gun culture in Canada than what we have here. Those guys are always shocked because I bring 2 shotguns in each caliber, in each gauge, and they're always like, "Why in the world would you need 4 shotguns to go hunting?" well,
as we know, 2 is 1 and 1 is
one is none. That's right. Especially if you're shooting semi-automatic shotguns, those things, any number of things can go wrong. So you want to have a backup gun when you're driving 1,500 miles like that.
All right, so you've put 4 or 5 days behind the wheel. You've made it across the border. How are you finding the places that you're hunting, and what are you hunting for? I guess that'd be a great place to start.
Yeah, so in that part of Saskatchewan, we're hunting for speckled belly geese, white front geese, and sandhill cranes. There's also ducks, a variety of ducks out there. And then there's also a little bit of upland hunting that we're doing as well. So it's a blend, nice blend.
Yeah, it sounds like it. All right, so those are your target species. So you made it across the border with your guns, your ammunition, your 2 beers, your tax money. How are you? Is it public land like it is in much of the West, or is it tougher to find places to hunt?
Yeah, there is some public land, but it's mostly big farms, and so there's a combination of maps that are of who owns what farm, and then phone book or the the guys that we've hunted on their property before, and so we'll ask for phone numbers that way, and you call or you go up to the door of the place you want to hunt, and you knock on the door and you say, "Hey, I drove up here from California, and are you willing to let me hunt those geese?" And I would say 95% of the time there is no issue. The Canadian farmers and the people who live in that part of the country are super inviting and engaging, and love to have the conversation, and usually will let us hunt on their property.
Oh, yeah, that's fantastic that you get that kind of response out there.
Yeah.
And so are you? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was saying it's kind of like what it would be like to be in rural California in 1950 or something. Like the people have got a lot of time to sit around and talk, and they appreciate that we appreciate their property.
All right. And so are you camping at campgrounds? Are you touching these farmers up for places to stay? What's the story there?
Yeah, so out in that part of the world, there's a lot of abandoned farms, or there's properties where they're still farming, but there's just no people living on the property. So we end up camping, and yeah, basically staying on a farmer's property, and getting maybe some electricity. That'll be about what we'd have in that camping situation.
All right. So I have spent a little bit of time driving through a different part of Canada to fish. So is it just tiny town after tiny town? I mean, are you out in the middle of nowhere? Are you getting in for a hamburger every now and then? Or are you just out there eating beanie weenies for the time you're there?
Yeah, the towns we stay in. One of the closest town to us is just a grain mill. That's all they got in the town, and maybe 6 houses still inhabited. And then 40 km away is a scratchy little motel that has a bar and some expensive hamburgers. So we're pretty much eating game meat or something that we picked up at the closest store, which is about 30 or 40 km away. So
all right,
we're pretty self-sufficient.
All right, that sounds okay. Okay, so we'll just keep going this chronologically, if that's all right, because I've got more questions. So you shot a bunch of geese, and I know I've had the opportunity to eat some of the crane that you shot. How are you managing your game coming back to the States? Surely you're not eating everything you shoot out there.
No, thank goodness. It's the hunting's better than that. Um, we pluck and fillet everything, and then uh, put it in a big cooler, and then get that cooler frozen
Okay.
at at the grocery store
Oh,
or someplace like that where they got room for a deep freeze.
so you'll take it to a thing, put it in their whatever walk-in freezer overnight, and come back and grab it. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and in that way it'll hold for the drive back.
And so then I assume you're hunting up there with some other friends. You must send that cooler back home with one of those guys and then continue your adventure. Is that the case?
Yeah, the sometimes we have to cross the border at the same time just because of possession limits. But
Okay.
yeah, one guy will take responsibility for it, and then the way the law is right now is that there has to be one wing still on the carcass so they can identify every bird. So by the time we do get home, we got to repackage everything to get it hygienic again. I guess is the best way to say it.
All right. So a little bit of work involved in the harvesting of that game.
Yep.
All right. So you've had a great hunt. You guys are all back in the United States across the border. Some guys are headed back home, and you are headed back to
Eastern Oregon
All
to
right.
start upland season. Yeah.
And you trigger fingers calloused up. I know from having spent a little bit of time with you recently that you are in excellent upland shape, or at least compared to me. So I'm sure that must be. I know I caught you toward the end of your trip, but I imagine there's probably a little bit of transition from duck hunting to the upland stuff. And I know you take your dog with you. Do you take your dog with you to Canada as well?
Yeah, he goes, and he's actually a pretty good retriever on the geese too. The CDC's got some new rules about importing your dog in and out of foreign areas, so that was a little bit more paperwork, and I'm sure there'll be some more charges on that next year also. But yeah, he's a pretty good goose dog, duck dog, but a really good upland hunter,
True.
and
True.
and so that part of the program, the dog part, is something I spend all year round working on, keeping that dog in shape to be able to upland hunt. Because while I may walk 5 or 6 miles in a day, he's going to do at least probably twice that, and the pointy dogs do 3 times what the hunter does. So, and he's getting up. He's 11 now, so. It's a process to keep him in shape enough so that he can stay healthy.
Well, he seemed like he's got a little motor in there, just won't quit. So it's fun to watch the two of you guys get after those birds. So I know that we met up near Hettner, Oregon here recently, and that's the sort of a home base for your upland stuff. How long are you out there?
Usually at least 2 weeks, kind of from the middle of October until the wind gets too cold and biting, and I'm ready to get out of the weather, or Halloween, whatever comes first.
Well, those 2 days definitely coincide, and I think I was out there with you the day the weather turned on us. So you had a pretty sweet camp set up. Will you talk a little bit about what you think you need out there to enjoy that sort of extended time afield, as far as your camp kitchen, your sleeping situation, stuff like that?
Yeah, I think there's a few parts to it. First thing for me was the addition of Starlink and being able to be anywhere in the world now, but anywhere I can drive and have good internet access, so I can work when I need to. So that's critical. Yes, I got the Starlink. I got a couple battery packs that'll run that. So at any one time, I got about 40 hours worth of internet with me. So that is critical.
We're going to circle back around to your business aspect. I've got another series of questions about that
All
later.
right.
But I know you and I are both at least keen observers of other people's camping situations, and like, that's a pretty good add-on. And I thought your setup was awesome. You got like some great storage stuff, full kitchen, just a general overall pretty comfortable camp. Um, is there any stuff that you're looking to get, or do you feel like you got it pretty well dialed in?
Well, like you're saying, the 13-gallon totes with the clear tops, those are bomber. I got the great Cabela's camp kitchen and the Camp Chef small propane tank with a distribution tree and a lantern, and the and a grill. So that little setup right there is pretty critical. And I didn't even have to fill up my propane tank over those 5 weeks. Like that little one was enough for my camp for the whole time. So that was pretty interesting to see. Flat space, is always critical. 2 tables plus the camp kitchen is kind of the minimum to be able to have room to work and eat and all those things without any discomfort. Some kind of a windproof 4-season tent is also critical.
I thought as we get older, I'm a relatively recent convert to the cot. For years spent my time on the ground, and I think for the time you're talking about, like just being able to get a decent restful sleep is critical.
Yeah. The cot and the 4-inch pad, right? That's been another nice innovation in the camping world, has been that 4-inch memory foam roll-up pad.
Yeah. There you go. Well, let's transition a little bit. I'll say one thing quickly about your kitchen setup, right? So you've got a regular Camp Chef stove, you've got a grill, you've got, I assume it's like the Coleman camp kitchen kind of deal. I mean, there's nothing you can't make happen out there.
Yeah.
I mean, you can grill it, you can fry it, you can boil it. It's a pretty sweet setup, and it seems very well maintained. So I think that's we have to throw some pictures of that up sometime. So going back to the Starlink as an example, I mean, one of the roadblocks when I'm fantasizing about this 5-week journey about how I would manage it myself is I know you're self-employed and have been for maybe as long as I've known you, or just about. How much time out of your week does it take you to keep your job going? And I know you said you got the Starlink, which really makes that stuff, I assume, just possible, where before it might not have been. You want to talk a little bit about how you manage all that and what sort of time commitment you have each week?
Yeah, I mean, it's variable. I mean, I'll say this about number one about the internet. I always have redundant systems. So I have the Starlink. I also have one of those cellular Wi-Fi routers. So if I do have cellular service, I can use that router in addition to the Starlink if I need to. So that's always one of our credos, right? Is redundant systems. So work-wise, yeah, I schedule my day either morning heavy or afternoon heavy, depending on what the rest of the events are doing. So if I'm hunting upland, then I'll schedule everything in the afternoons after 2, so I'm going to be working 10 to 20 hours a week during that time. My team knows that I'm out. They see my schedule. They work around that. I try to maintain my team meetings that we've had for forever. So I still have twice a week, 8 a.m. meetings to keep the team moving ahead. And then client meetings are just based on the weather and how the hunting is. And then I have somebody else take the meeting for that day, right, or I take it, just depending on how quickly we got done with the hunting or fishing.
Oh, that's awesome. To save people just a little bit of time Googling, do you know off the top of your head, like what the Starlink, kind of what the entry point is and like what sort of maintenance fees you have on that thing?
Yeah, I think right now with that the Starlink this generation, the mini one, I think it's like $300 to get the hardware, and then it's like 100 and a quarter a month is the cost of the internet service, but you can turn that on and off. So it's not a 12-month commitment; it's a monthly commitment. So when you're not using it, you can turn it off, which is really nice.
Wow, that seems. I would have assumed that entry cost on that was 10 times that. So that's very interesting. So that's approachable if you are a person who wants to spend a ton of time outdoors or more than normal and have something in your back pocket where you could still answer some emails and maybe get on a video call every now and then.
Probably the bigger expense will be the 1,000 watt-hour battery pack and inverter. So that right now, those are somewhere between like $700 and $1,000 probably for a good one. Yeah.
But that's a one time. I mean, once you kind of, get that thing invested in, it's yours for. So that's pretty neat. Then there's also got to be this work-life balance. So you and I are both blessed to have partners that are seemingly extremely understanding about our need to be outdoors. I know I'm super lucky. I don't know if I'm as lucky as you are, so I'm curious how you manage, how you got that clear runway for this amount of time, and then what you do while you're on the road to, keep your personal relationships going that are out there.
Yeah, well, no, it's true. I do front load this time by spending all summer playing golf with my very understanding partner. So we June, July, August is golf season, and play pretty much every day with Susan. So that I'm front loading it a little bit. 5 weeks is a long time, and it's tough to be away that long from a relationship. But when I'm in range of cellular, then we talk a few times a week, and then if I'm on the internet, then we'll do some kind of video conference a couple times a week. So and then we have things scheduled when I get back. So that's the other part of it: front loading and then schedule afterwards.
And so that was a great transition into my question about your transition. So you've been on the road in feral for 5 weeks, kind of not exactly off leash, but wandering.
Yeah.
What is it like when you get home and start putting the sleeping bags away? Is it similar to your transition going out there where you've got it arranged, or you sort of taper back into it, or is it kind of abrupt change back to the day-to-day?
Yeah, I'm more of a taper. So, the first thing I want to do is get all the gear out of my truck and get that empty again, right? And then I want to go through every tote and reorganizing and get those totes organized again, and then make the list of things that I need to add for the next trip.
Sure.
Because there's nothing better than getting done with a trip and then looking forward to a trip. So, the next trip I'll be in the very eastern reaches of Oregon. It'll be cold. I'm thinking about, as I'm unpacking, I'm thinking about what I'm going to repack to go on that trip so that I have what I need for the winter weather conditions.
What trip is that?
Go do some chucker hunting out in the big empty, that Oregon, Idaho, Nevada section of the West.
Right on. Well, I mean, I really think it's so phenomenal that you've managed to not only arrange this, but just to conceive of this amount of time off. Because if at least in the Pacific Northwest, if a sportsman had a time he could block out of a calendar, it would be the time that you blocked out. Absolutely everything starts happening kind of October-ish. I am quite envious of you. I think it is a fantastic trip, and I am going to endeavor. I don't know if I'm ever going to get 5 weeks off, but I really do think it's quite admirable and envious that you have managed to figure out how to do it. So,
Well, that's cool. I think you could do it too. I think you got 5 weeks in you.
I may have to build up. I definitely know I'm going to have to start walking some hills if I'm ever to keep up with you in Texas. So.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, it's been, thanks for digging into this with me. I appreciate that, Kelley.
It is a pleasure, Emmanuel. I'm sending you some photos of you and your dog, so I hope they turn out good for you, and we'll talk again soon.
All right, that sounds good. Well, thanks. See you soon.
All right, buddy.
This episode of Nature Bound. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Be sure to purchase your copy of The 7 Principles of the Magic Rock at emmanuelrose.com or on Amazon. We thank you again for joining us today, and